Hello. So welcome to part 2 of the online digital video synth stuff class. And as you can see, we've got some feedback happening in the corner there. Some audio feedback. I can hear that there's like a full... Oh, I can't hear it anymore. That was like a 2-second delay. That would have been fun to play with if we could put use like a webcam involved.
I think that's standard YouTube together with video. It's synced. It's just like delay, like in the stream.
But yeah, it's got to take 2 seconds to get there and to make sure that I'm not. Yeah. Do they actually check for that? I thought they just checked for copyrighted stuff. They checked for copyrighted pornography, right?
Are they allowing any pornography?
Yeah. But yeah, so I'm just gonna sort of like spin the wheels here for a moment and like give everyone time to catch up. The first chunk we went through Vsynth, and now we're gonna spend another chunk working on Hydra. So a couple of people asked about like what you need to start with from here, and this whole class is for people starting from nothing. So don't worry about any sort of prereqs. All you need for this, for Hydra, is you need to have a browser up, and you need to go to this link here, and the link is in the description of this video too. So it's hydraeditor.glitch.me, and then you'll pull up. It won't give you the exact same thing on this, because when you go into Hydra, it'll just randomly select one of a bunch of different patches in here. And if you hit this little thing on the corner here that I'm hitting, it'll just keep pulling up more and more random patches. So here's a pretty dank one right here. But yeah, I'm just going to keep spinning my wheels until I know that everybody in the workshop is ready to go. Everybody ready?
Yes.
Okay, so I guess we'll just get started here. So, Hydra, where to start? It's very, so if you were following along, Hydra is very much influenced by analog modular video synthesis as well, in terms of you start from oscillators and then you fuck around with the oscillators and you get all this kind of crazy stuff. But the format is a little different. In Vsynth, this was in Max MSP, so that's called node-based programming. So you got to do a lot of mouse work where you're dragging and dropping and whatnot. Hydra is live coding, meaning you can just type things in and it'll update live. So I'm going to pull up the documentation on GitHub in another tab too, and I would recommend everyone else do this too, because part of what I'm going to teach you here is not necessarily just how to learn, Hydra, but just how to learn programming languages in general. And one of the most important things about learning programming languages is you got to understand the grammar, and well, you don't actually have to understand the grammar. The base level things of what everyone does, this is how everybody learns programming languages for the first time, is you just copy stuff, paste it, and then change tiny little bits of it and see what happens. So we're going to be pulling over to this whole section here, which has like all of the basic like functionality of, wait, not this one. What's the other one? Complete list of functions. That was what we want. So we'll keep complete list of functions open, and we'll just be copying and pasting stuff from the complete list of functions over and see what happens. So like you don't even really need to like type things or even be able to spell. Like I'm terrible at spelling, and I like basically program for a living because I do a lot of copying and pasting. If I had to like type everything, whenever I do actually type everything out the right time, I always make spelling errors and it slows me down. It's crazy. But yeah, so we pulled up complete list of functions. We're all here. So let's X out of this thing and let's just delete everything here. I'm going to start from here. So all you want to do is have osc. Let's delete this as well. So just osc and out. You don't want to have this extra thing in here. And then, what is it?
I think the buffer is a problem.
Yeah, how do I clear the buffer? Do I turn off 0, 1?
Yes, you can take that off.
Yeah. There we go. So osc.out and nothing in the argument. Some terminology. When you have osc is a function, out is a function. You know they're functions because they have parentheses after them. And functions need arguments usually. But these don't, because if you don't feed anything into them right away, they'll just run with some defaults. So you can see the default for oscillator out is just, it's very similar to how we started off in Vsynth. It's just white and black alternating strips moving, although this one's moving in the other direction as Vsynth was, but. And out just means it gets published. If you don't have out, it'll be like, I don't know what to do with this. It's not even compiling when I try to do that. Oh yeah, and what's the keystrokes on Windows for compiling? Control and enter. So
I don't know.
Shift, enter, Control Shift.
I think Control Enter is just one line, and if you have like a block of code, it's Control Alt.
So whenever you change things, you need to recompile it. So it's not 100% live coding. You have to tell it when to recompile things. So I changed something, and then I'm on a Mac, so I go Control Shift Enter. And is everybody with me? Is everybody? It looks different. Does it say the same thing as mine? Does it say osc empty dot out? Yeah. And do you have anything in the out?
I think no.
Nope.
Did you run it or not? Control Enter or Command Enter?
Control Shift Enter.
Yeah, because it was different before.
Okay.
Huh.
What is this stuff?
So it doesn't matter. Yeah, when you have the two, so up here at the top, it's always going to say like who wrote the basic thing. You have these two things. That means you comment something out, and that means the compiler isn't going to pay attention to that at all. So you can write whatever you want in here, and it doesn't matter. But let me just hop on over.
This I just reloaded.
Wow, maybe your defaults are different. Or...
I don't know. I mean, just go with it, you know. like definitely whenever like something accidentally happens and it looks great, like
I'm doing it.
The thing about digital systems is there's a lot happening. So with digital systems, there's always a fuck ton of things happening under the hood that you really don't have access to unless you're working at a very low level. This Hydra is written using JavaScript and WebGL, both of which are pretty high level. So you don't really get that much low level access unless you're like directly going into the shaders that it's automatically generating and like messing around with that, which that's totally beyond the scope of this. But yeah, so we all basically have some oscs going out, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then, so I want to know what osc means and what else I can do with it. So I'm going to go over to this and I'm going to look up osc. So I want to know what I can feed into that. So here where it says osc, and then within the parentheses, it says frequency, sync, and offset. So it'll tell you what the defaults are. So what it's running at is 60, 0.1, and 0. So let's just try. Let's just make sure that everyone's being honest here. And I'll enter 60. I'll enter 0.1, comma, 0.1, and then comma, 0.0. And then if I recompile this, Control Shift Enter, nothing changes because all I did was just explicitly tell it to do what the defaults were happening. So that's good to know. And then I want to double check if you do that, does it change anything? Didn't change anything. Wow. Do you want to try maybe closing your browser and reopening it? What browser are you using, by the way? You're in Chrome. Do you have any other browsers?
I do.
Maybe trying to.
There's like unlock and VPN. I don't know if that's the
I don't think they should, but you never know. That's the other thing about all the under the hood stuff is this is compiling like this is not necessarily like there's just too many variables happening.
Too many wires.
Too many yeah. Well, let's not go into that. Okay, so I've got OSC 60, 0.1, 0.0. That's not very helpful. I don't know what the heck any of that crap means. So the first one means frequency. But I don't know. I don't really know what frequency means in this. It could mean all sorts of things. Best way to find out what it means is just to go in there and change it. I'm going to delete that 0, change it by a power of 10, and I'm seeing that. Okay, so that makes the overall frequency, the exact time. So remember when we were working on the Vsynth thing, we had time and we had frequency. There were 2 arguments for how the sort of rate of things were moving worked. So frequency is how many of these things on the screen there's going to be. And if I turn this up to an absurd number, let's do 600. And then, oh yeah, there's like 600 of these things happening here. Maybe, probably not, but. And then let me go up another power of 10. Another way I like to explore programming languages is just to feed it ridiculous numbers and see what happens when I do that. So it definitely started aliasing a long time ago. And you can see it's starting to look like it's even like smaller now. And then once I get up to this, it's just gray because there's just not even enough information for it to work with. But yeah, so that's what the first argument means. And that's how I figured it out from, well, no, I've played with this before. I'm just pretending that I haven't. Well, it's the second argument, sync. Default is 0.1. So I'm just going to do the exact same thing that I did there, where I just change it by powers of 10. And recompile it. Okay, so sync on this means the same thing as time on Vsynth. What it means is it's the overall speed of how it's moving this way instead of the frequency of how many oscillations you get per screen draw. And it's that same sort of thing where we're dealing with the oscillator in this situation is a one-dimensional signal that we're multiplexing out into a two-dimensional frame. So we need to have 2 different arguments for how it operates. One argument for how it operates within the frame, because we're working within a frame. We're not working with a one-dimensional pressure signal hitting our ears. We're working in a 2-dimensional situation. So we need to have this argument, which controls how many times per frame it's working, and we need this argument, which says how fast is it going? How fast is it going to move through the screen? Does that make sense to everybody? Awesome. Do you still have a glitch screen?
No, now I have the same results.
Okay, cool. Yeah, well, now we know. Sometimes with Chrome, you can get amazing glitches. And then, so there's one more argument in oscillator. So maybe we should take a look over at that and see what that means. So we figured out what frequency means, figured out what sync means. Now, what does offset mean? So if we think back to what we were doing on Vsynth, the main arguments we had were time, frequency, and then we could also play around with the pulse width, which you don't see any pulse width here. So, and you can play around with phase. So maybe offset has something to do with phase. Let's find out. There's no offset here. Let me just increase this. And looks like there's some color happening now. Why would there be color happening if I've increased offset? Wow, I increased it to 1, and we've got a gradient moving. Does anyone have any idea what is happening right now? Yeah, exactly. So when we were working before, we were working with combining 3 black and white signals into RGB. That's the last thing we did with Vsynth, really. So we're offsetting the different components that we're adding up to being black and white. So you're getting this sort of rainbow gradient thing happening. So that's pretty dank. So we've got an oscillator and we've got it going out. But it doesn't look like we can really do much more than just this sort of vertical scrolling thing right now. So I definitely want to figure out how to like make things a little more dynamic in this zone. So we've got sources, and let's go back up to the list here. There should be a big list of all the functions and whatnot. So we've got operators. This is what you can do with multiple sources. Maybe we should add 2 sources together. You can modulate scroll Y. Does that mean anything to anybody?
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, you've already taken multiple classes in this.
Yeah, 1 actually.
You took.
I still don't have intuition of the offset. If we put like very big numbers, what the heck?
That's aliasing.
Okay.
Looks like that is definitely aliasing. So something. Yeah, let's do what Soul's doing. She fed some really large numbers into offset. Where were you at? Like 100, 1,000?
2,000, I think.
So if I feed in 100, it's still pretty smooth. Let's go up another power of 10. So I'm still smooth right now.
2,000.
2,000?
Really?
I'm gonna go up to 10,000. Oh, wow. So the higher I go, the more neon it gets. I think that is also some form of aliasing as well. Another thing to note is that you're not everyone is going to have the same results when you work on these things, because Hydra is working with your GPU, and everyone's GPU is different. Everyone's CPU is slightly different. It's not really, but whatever. So depending on what sort of rate everything is refreshing at, depending on if you have like a bunch of Adobe Creative Cloud, like security garbage running in the background, clogging up all of your system, it's going to run at different rates. So you might get stepping. You might get that sort of like digital thing where it can't refresh at the same rate.
Yes, now it's gone.
But yeah, you've got it smooth now,
Yeah.
but it was like not smooth for a moment. And also because this is working in a browser, it's also going to depend partially on like network things, right? So we're all on the network right now, and we're also live streaming over the network. So that's going to definitely interfere with all of these signals. But yeah, so let's figure out something else we can do with this. Oh, modulate collide. That sounds pretty dank. Modulate hue. I love to modulate hues. So I see this. I like the sound of modulating hue. So I'm just going to copy this and then paste it. That way I don't have to worry about misspelling things. If you are more confident in your spelling abilities. Whoa. I keep going back from Windows to Macintoshes to Unix or Linux-based systems, and I always forget what the hotkey things are on each one of them, depending on what I've been using recently. So trying to like copy and paste things is always fun to see what was sitting in my buffer. So this had 2 arguments, color and amount. And I'm not even going to look at what the defaults were. I'm just going to feed it 1 and 1, execute, and see what happens. So, as you can guess, this might be normalized. So just giving it 1 and 1 is going to do nothing. Oh yeah, do we need to feed a texture into here to do that?
I think.
So to feed a texture, so color and amount, where would we feed or does the texture before it?
You can put the, like, I think with an oscillator it works,
Yeah, it should work with an oscillator, right?
but maybe it doesn't change anything. Maybe with a color. Color is a texture.
Yeah, let me turn up this phase thing for a moment. This offset. And yeah, I think this is just hue modulation on my end right now. Everybody else have something similar? How's everybody doing? Yeah, that was just modulating hue. So I turned off all the offset things. And I'm back here. And I'm going to pop that hue modulate back in there. Modulate hue. I give it 1.0, 1.0. Vroom. Nothing's happening. Cannot read property name of undefined. So I need to feed it in a texture as the first argument.
Yes.
So that's where it's getting the color information. It's not going to get that from anywhere else.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So I modulate. Oh, modulate hue is going to modulate the hue of what's coming in, what the pointer is before it, with the texture that you feed into it. So let's set up a camera input. Is everybody okay with doing camera inputs?
Mm-hmm.
Rad. Let's just go right to that. So how do I get a camera in here? I'm over on the GitHub thing. Let me just see cam. Huh. Source?
I think init cam is the function.
Init cam is the function?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
and where would we find it on here? I want to show everyone where to
If you
find
put
it.
Init cam, maybe. Or init, just init.
Yeah, if I do cam, nothing shows
Cam
up.
with uppercase, the first, the C.
This is not case sensitive.
Okay.
Well, I guess you can't find it on here.
I think there were some examples on
Init, like that?
Yes, but first you have to put like the source, which you would be calling like source one dot the method.
There is the on a landing page.
On the landing page? Yeah, that's the other one. But, so if I just do s1.initCam and execute that, that should turn on a camera.
Yeah.
And is everybody with me? s1.initCam should move this so it's not totally blocked off on the projector. And you should get a little thing that says, I need you to turn on the camera because JavaScript had to make it so you have to ask permission for camera things because people were hacking camera inputs for like malware and like ransomware purposes like a long time ago. And it turned JavaScript into like basically like perceived malware for a lot of the internet. But I'm okay with allowing it to use my camera right now. Mm-hmm. All right, so everybody got a camera initialized?
Mm-hmm.
So s1.initCam means we're going to take the camera and we're feed that into s1. S1 means source one. That is what that is short for. And then, because
I think that you should put source of S1, SRC. There, no, it's okay. Then when you're modulating.
When I'm modulating?
Yes, it's for calling the source. You just like this.
Oh, you're saying to double check that we actually have something?
Yes.
Yeah. So SRC, S1.
No, yes, and also for modulating, if you don't call the function source, it's like, whoa. That's good.
So if y'all do what I do, you should be able to double check that you've got this coming out. And we can just double check and play around with feedback for a quick second. Oh, yeah. So another thing that Hydra does with camera inputs is it does not preserve aspect ratios whatsoever. By aspect ratio, I'm talking about this camera is pointing something at probably like 640 by 480. But this is definitely not 640 by 480 pixels here. It's whatever the width of the screen is. And then if I change the screen, it's just going to stretch the camera in there. But actually, this is pretty close to 640 by 480 right now that I did this. A good way you can test aspect ratios is just by playing with feedback. I can see that it's sort of this is different from this, right? This is a qualitative difference in what's happening. Yeah, anyway, so we all tested our source. Let's go back up to this thing and see what happens when I execute this. Nothing. Okay, and then amount. So let's change the amount here. Do I need to do anything else with this, like SRC, like?
Let's go back to the documentation. I think I don't. I used modular Q and I never knew what I was doing.
Yeah, same.
Yeah.
Finding that out right now. So documentation says color and amount, and then it says texture, color, source, shape.
I should put the shape. It's not doing anything.
Yeah, it's not doing anything. Oh, well. So let's ditch that. Go back up to this list here. There's other modulators too, but now that we have the camera hooked up, maybe we don't need an oscillator at all. Maybe we just want to play with the camera. So SRC S1 out. So there's a lot of pretty awesome stuff you can do with the camera on here by, if you know me, you know this is where this is going next. I'm going to start doing some feedback on this. So for feedback, we're going to need to, so if you don't specify out, this is just O1, right? Or O0. O0. So your default, so there's S1, S2, and there's a bunch of different sources you can use, and you have multiple outputs that you can use. And the default, if you don't specify anything here, is going to be O0. O0. It looks like a weird ooh. But you see, if you recompile this, nothing should change. So let's try mixing O0 back in with this. So if we look in here, there's different ways to mix. I think blend is the one which is just linear interpolation. So if we blend texture amount. So SRC S1 dot blend, and then SRC O0 amount 0.5. Pretty sure this one's normalized to be 0 and 1. And see what it does. Pretty much nothing because we're not changing anything. It's probably just like blowing it out a bit, right? So if we want to see what's going on here, maybe we need to change like some positions or something. Scroll X. Scroll X means on this is it's just going to like adjust the position of things in the X direction. So let's take this source here, O0, scroll X. Let's look at what that will take as an argument. Bump, 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 bump. Modulate scroll X. That looks dank too. So amount and speed, right? Scroll X speed. Ha 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 ha. Yeah, let's just put some numbers in there. 1, 1. Is this the one where you need to put like the decimal points and everything too?
No. When you have a float, it's a float now. When you have like 1, if you do, you don't need the decimals.
You don't need the decimal points?
No.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a habit that like a lot of older programmers get into, is to always put decimal points in if you're working with floating points, and to not if you're working with integers. If that makes no sense to you, you can just ignore what I said. But yeah, so what the heck is going on here? Is everybody with me?
Yes.
No? Where you at? So we can see, you got it? So what is happening here is, remember when I pointed the camera at the screen? I'm doing the same thing, but digitally. So I'm just pointing when I'm blending SRC 00 with this source, what I'm doing is I'm making an internal loop. It's taking the output and blending it with the input. It's taking the previous frame, the frame that's being drawn to the screen, and blending it in with the one that we're capturing. So it's moving really fast. I wonder if I can slow this down a bit. It just keeps scrolling all crazy. That didn't do it. But maybe this one will. Yeah. So the second argument here is going to control the general rate. And this first one, what does the first one do? The first one is scroll X. What does that mean? Scroll X, argument scroll X. Hey, Olivia, what does this mean? Oh, huh. So I changed it to 1.
I think that is like the position, maybe?
The overall position? Yeah, because it seemed like it changed the phase a moment, if that makes sense in this context. So I went from 0.1, and that changed it, and then I went to 10.
Maybe 10 is hard.
And it's changing, so I think this is changing global, like a linear offset, and the other one is like a multiplier. So I think this is like a linear operation, where the first one is how far off do you start, and the second one is like a multiplier. Is everything going okay with y'all?
Yeah, I pressed the wrong one. It's going crazy.
Oh, nice. Heck yeah. Yeah. That's the other nice thing about working with digital systems, is they break in the most fun ways. Analog systems, when they break, it's just electricity isn't going somewhere and you've got no signal. Digital systems, we're not really breaking it. We're just like cybernetically misappropriating signal flows for creative purposes. And it looks great. And if you just like enter the wrong number in, like it's not going to electrocute and overload the function. It's just going to do wacky, fun stuff like that. I have to use the bathroom again. Can you sit here and attend to the live stream, people?
Entertain.
We got to change the rate of these videos. I think 40 minutes is all I can do with my bladder size.
So, is it same controls we are on Mac here? Shift Alt Enter. Okay. So what about if we do Y? X. Okay, immediately. Oops.
You're misspelling scroll X.
Oh, yes. I tried Y here.
With the X is uppercase.
Uppercase. Oh, that's why. Okay.
And
Does
I
this
think
work?
that you have
Huh?
Okay. That's
Okay, now we are playing with Y.
Can play with both.
Yeah. Okay, the one.
Oh, scroll Y. Excellent
Yeah, I'm
work.
just. Let's add some.
So what if we scroll Y and scroll X at the same time?
Wow. I'll just add. Oops, doesn't work. Is it good? Oh, okay.
Yeah, keep going.
Just want.
So
Look
we've
like,
only got about 15 minutes left with Hydra. Who wants to know something in
Let's
Hydra
add-
before we go?
Oops, doesn't work. What happened?
What's the best way to record it without the code on top?
To
You can
record it
hide
without
code.
the
I think that's
yeah, there's just a command that hides the hides it as an output, so you can have another screen going out as an output.
Okay. Yeah.
Is that correct?
Sorry.
If you're using that,
Why does this
so if
doesn't
you wanna
work?
write on yours and
Why?
then send it
I
out to
love
an
trash.
external monitor. There's one where you can see the code.
You can
and hide
do
it.
it from the browser. You can do that.
Mhm.
From the other monitor?
Okay, and do you know that one offhand, or should we all look it up together?
We should
Okay.
look it up together.
Let's look it up together.
I don't have memory.
The very useful question of
Looks like
how do
there
we
is
hide
something.
this code?
I think that the easiest
Brought up.
thing anyway is like running the command to hide the code, and you still got your. You can look that. I thought it was like Control H.
Oh, so that's just a text shortcut.
Yes. There's a shortcut.
Command H.
Command H.
Try Command H. See what it does.
Command H.
Yeah.
Control
One would be
H. This is this command.
Yeah, I don't even know, yo. Try them both.
I think. Okay, that's it. We crashed the system.
Okay, I got this.
That was command H.
Command H just hid Vivaldi, perhaps. Donde? Oh, there you are. How do we hide the code?
In Windows, it's Shift Control H.
Shift Control H. So it's probably Shift Control. Yeah. Everybody got it? Is that written down anywhere?
No, I tried it.
You just remembered it?
No, I tried with combinations of stuff, and that worked. It was something H.
Yeah, on this keyboard, it's Shift Control everything is like all of the Hydra shortcuts.
Delete that H there.
What's thresh?
Thresh is a threshold overall of the threshold processing of input.
Threshold processing. What is threshold processing?
Image on an image.
I don't know what
Like-
that means.
Oh, how to explain that?
I use it like it's when you
It's
do
just-
photographs of
it's just like-
copies of something.
Making trash out of nice image. Really,
Making a thresh out of a nice image.
yeah. It's
I don't know what is thresh, but I
It's-
always think about it like if you are taking a copy of something and like you know that they like get the
So if I set thresh to 0, 0, nothing goes through. And if I set it to 1, 1, it's very dark. So is this some sort of like sharpening or contrast thing?
yeah, sharpening and contrast. You're right.
Mm-hmm. And if we look over here at thresh, bum, bum, bum. Threshold and tolerance. Default is 0.5. Oh, that one's got to be a lot smaller. So when you look at things like this and you see what the defaults are, that can kind of give you an idea of what the overall like normalization and ranges are. So this one default is at 0.5. So I would just kind of like hazard a guess that it's like 0 to 1. And then when you see something this one's another scale of magnitude off where it starts at 0.04. So I would start playing with the smaller values and the hundreds. Because you can see when I fed it like Ah, that's nothing. Wow. I literally don't understand what thresh
Oh.
means. I'm not like pretending not to for
Do-
educational purposes.
It's I think it's making black and white plus adding like unsharp, you know, or
It's adding an unsharp mask over everything.
yeah, you know, heavy unsharp mask, so contrast and
Yeah. But let's see. There's some other things we can do with this. Wah, wah, wah. I like the idea of saturate. I find playing around with saturation in feedback loops is pretty amazing. So I want to add more saturation to the source 0 that's coming back in. So basically, you can put that, I think, anywhere in there. I'm just going to put that right here. I'm going to write saturate. And let's just see what the default does. That's pretty great.
it's nice.
Oh, before I end, we got to talk about modulation. So let me try to modulate the saturation in here. So you do that by, what's this one? Oh yeah. So I'm just going to copy and paste this right here. So here's an example of a modulator right here, where it starts and it says time. So it's right above geometry. If you're following along, Control F geometry, and then right up here, you'll see this little example function here. This is basically an LFO. It's going to work the same way that LFOs do in audio processing. What all of this terminology means here is that there's this parentheses and then a little arrow that goes to math.sine, time divided by 2. Loosely speaking, what this means is it's going to say, hey, I got a function here, and we'll use the output of this function as the number every time that we draw this screen. Math.sine means, hey, there's a library called math that has a function called sine. It's just going to work on time over 2. Time over 2 in this case is just the total number of elapsed seconds since we started playing around with this. But if I just remember what my keyboard shortcuts are and what operating system I'm working on right now, this would all go a lot faster. And I'm copying and pasting because, like I said, I'm sloppy, I'm bad at spelling, and I don't want to like waste time like fixing all the little like parentheses errors that I would do normally. If you're feeling much more confident in your skills than I am, then don't copy and paste. But I recommend everyone who's getting started with coding just copy and paste all the time, because you can end up with a lot of silly errors that it's really hard to like debug. So I'm going to turn this up a bit, right? I'm just going to multiply this whole thing by 10. Doesn't like that. Maybe I need to multiply this by 10? How do I multiply this whole thing by 10? Yeah. So right at the end, I multiplied it by 10, and you can see what is happening. It's modulating the amount of saturation up and down at this frequency. And if I take time and I make this, let's try making this even slower. Time divided by 10. It's going to modulate things way slower now. What else do we got here? Let's take this offset on scroll Y down to like 0, and let's take this one down even smaller too. And also try mixing this up a bit stronger. I like having 3 different screens that I can look at and see how it's aliasing on each one. But we are about to finish up this portion. So like I don't know if I mentioned this at the beginning. None of these are really supposed to be any sort of like comprehensive how to do anything. This is literally just like how to dip your toes into these things and just saying these exist. These are tools you can use, and I'm trying to like show y'all's how I personally figure out how to use things. But yeah, this is by no means like some sort of categorically like useful like introduction to all of Hydra. Hydra is fucking massive and it's amazing, and there's a lot of documentation out there, and there's like groups where you can like there's a screen sharing like chat built into Hydra now where you can live code with other people. You can share screens over networks. You can try to find someone else who knows way more about Hydra than me, because almost everybody who uses it does. And have them sort of like help you out with jamming out. But yeah, there's so much to this. You can do audio reactive stuff. It's got built-in like audio analyzers, so you can just like feed it in like claps and sounds from like your mic to like affect the visuals. It's crazy. I'm not even scratching the surface of this.
You can also use P5 and all that other stuff like integrated.
You can use p5.js integrated with this.
If P5, yes, you can start.
Yeah, that's bonkers.
Yeah.
So p5.js is beyond the scope of this class, but if you know what I'm talking about, that's pretty cool.
If you know P5, you can like use it in Hydra.
That's amazing. But yeah, we're going to stop the stream right now. And then the next thing we're going to catch up on in about, not at 6, but probably at like 6:05, 6:10 or so is video waves. So if you haven't gotten around to downloading and installing that yet, you're definitely not going to by the time that we start up again. So definitely just like work on that and maybe check out the video like afterwards. But yeah, thanks a lot, and see you back in like 10-15 minutes or so. Definitely please, like, I am reading the chat things that you write. So Michael, I can't read that because I have bad vision. And Kevin, thanks for thanks for retracting your message, I guess. Oh yeah, also, if you're watching this and you feel like this has improved your life in some manner, and or you would just like to like give me money for things, I wrote a link right there where you can, you go to my website and there's a PayPal button at the bottom there. And basically, if you donate money to me for doing these things, then I'll do more of them. That's sort of how this system works. Thanks so much. Okay, see you in a second.